In the blistering summer of 1986, deep within the mist-veiled Blue Ridge Mountains, a father and his 9-year-old daughter vanished without a trace during what was meant to be a peaceful weekend camping trip. They drove in with laughter, dreams, and marshmallows packed in the back seat, only to disappear like a whisper in the wind. Days later, their pickup truck was discovered abandoned near the charred skeleton of a hunting cabin. No bodies, no footprints, only scorched earth, melted memories, and a silence so heavy it felt deliberate. 38 years passed. Then, on a cold March morning in 2024, while repairing a washed-out trail near the long-forgotten Burnt Hollow Path, Park Ranger Elise Granger struck something buried deep beneath the forest floor. Her shovel clanged against stone. Stone too refined, too intentional to be natural. Her breath caught. Kneeling down, she brushed away the layers of time with gloved fingers, uncovering scorched bricks mortared together and a rusted iron ring sealed into a trapdoor. It had been hidden for decades, cloaked by time and root and moss. The forest held its breath. Elise gripped her radio. Her voice trembled. "I think I found something." Beneath the old cabin site. Flashback to July 14th, 1986. A dusty Ford F-150 sat at an angle on the gravel road, one tire swallowed by a rut like it had tried to escape and failed. Sheriff Alan Boyd stepped out of his cruiser, sweat already tracing lines beneath his collar as cicadas screamed through the pine-heavy air. The truck was empty. No keys, no backpacks, no gear. Just a child-sized pink windbreaker draped casually over the front seat, like someone meant to return for it. Deputy Marie Latimer scanned the license plate. Matches what Janice Halbrook told us. Jim took their daughter Lucia camping Saturday morning. They should have been home last night. Alan's gaze drifted down a steep embankment. In the distance, through a curtain of trees, the blackened ruins of a cabin emerged, its skeletal beams jutting into the sky like broken fingers. The roof had collapsed, but not in decay. It had burned. "Fire," Marie whispered. "Looks fresh." They descended slowly, pine needles slick underfoot. With every step closer, the air thickened. A bitter smell lingered beneath the scent of ash, something sharp, something human. The remains of the cabin looked like a grave. Tin cans melted into the hearth, plastic remnants fused to blackened wood. At the far side of the clearing, Marie called out. She was kneeling at a patch of earth where the soil was darker, disturbed. Alan stepped closer. His chest tightened. There, half buried in scorched soil, was a small, blackened shoe. Nearby, the warped remains of a plastic lunchbox, Lucia's. A faded sticker of Rainbow Bright peeled at the corners, just visible through the ash. "Janice said she packed lunch for the trip," Alan murmured. Marie nodded. She was 9. The silence between them was heavier than the heat. No bodies, no drag marks, no blood. But something about the fire, its precision, its isolation, felt intentional, like a performance staged for someone who would come looking. Alan turned to the fireplace, the only structure still standing, like a sentinel. "This fire was too clean," he said softly. "Too perfect." "You think it was staged?" Marie asked. "I think someone wanted us to believe they died here, but where are the remains?" He scanned the clearing again, then spoke with grim resolve. "We need arson investigators, and K-9 units, and someone has to tell Janice." 2 hours south, in the Halbrook kitchen, Janice stood frozen at the sink, her hand locked on the countertop. Outside, the swing set hung still in the summer air. Her sister, Beth, flipped quietly through Lucia's coloring books, each crayon stroke a soft echo of a voice now missing. "They're just late," Beth said gently. "You know how Jim is with time up there." Janice didn't respond. Her eyes were locked on Lucia's empty shoes, still by the door. The grape jelly sandwiches she packed that morning remained untouched in the fridge. Jim had promised they'd be back by Sunday dinner. Instead, the house was silent, so quiet it screamed. When the phone rang, Her hand shook as she reached for it. She already knew. Back in Burke County, the forensics team scoured the ruins. Dogs searched the perimeter. One picked up a faint trail leading north, but it vanished within 30 yards, right where fresh tire tracks bit into the soil. Alan knelt beside a technician, analyzing the fire pit. Burned paper, melted plastic, a warped thermos. A piece of metal, maybe a license plate, half consumed by flame. The technician shook her head. No bones, no human tissue, just things someone left behind. Alan stood slowly, the mountain whispered around them. Whatever had happened in that cabin, it was never meant to be found. If anyone had been inside when the cabin burned, they didn't stay long. That much was certain. Sheriff Alan Boyd stood quietly, his eyes fixed on a small evidence bag resting on the tailgate of the forensics truck. Inside, a melted child's shoe, Lucia's, lay curled like a wounded animal. One lace was missing, the rubber toe warped and blistered from intense heat. Objects like this carried more than physical weight. They bore memory, pain, and the bitter sting of questions left unanswered. Marie approached, clipboard in hand. Fire Marshal traced the origin point to the fireplace. No traces of accelerants, but the burn pattern was deliberate. Contained, too precise for a simple accident. Alan's eyes narrowed. So someone set this fire with care. She nodded. K9 picked up faint tracks to the north, led to an old cigarette pack. Not Jim's brand. No prints yet. Looks like it's been here for decades. Alan exhaled slowly, then turned to study the skeletal remains of the cabin. There was a tension in his jaw, an old instinct stirring behind his badge. Something happened here, he said, voice low. And whoever did it, they wanted it erased. The next morning, wind threaded through the Blue Ridge trees with a sharp, whistling hush. Ranger Elise Granger crouched by the scorched hearth of the cabin ruins, brushing ash and earth from a partially exposed stone hatch. What she now knew wasn't just debris, but the sealed threshold to something older, hidden. Something meant to stay buried. She hadn't slept. Her mind replayed the moment the shovel struck stone like a broken record. The hollow clang, the sudden give of soil, the unease that pooled in her stomach like ice water. When she returned at dawn with a crowbar and flashlight, she'd seen what lay beneath. A sealed iron hatch and the corner of a box that should not have survived. She hadn't told anyone yet, not everything, not until she was sure. The sound of boots crunching through dry leaves broke the silence. Sheriff Rebecca Lane emerged from the underbrush, her posture crisp and commanding, with deep lines at her eyes and the kind of calm that came from decades of seeing the worst in people. Beside her was a young evidence tech carrying a silver case. "You're the one who called it in?" Lane asked, eyeing the blackened cabin remains. "Yes, ma'am. Elise Granger. I've been patrolling this ridge 5 years now. Locals call this place Devil's Elbow. Nobody comes up here anymore." Lane raised an eyebrow. "Not since the Halbrook case." Elise hesitated, then nodded. "I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I found something." She led them across the brittle remains of the floor and pointed toward the exposed trapdoor, partially unearthed by last week's rain. "This wasn't in the ranger maps, not even mentioned in 1950s topography records. It's not a root cellar. It's not anything that was supposed to be here." Lane knelt and shone her flashlight through a crack in the stonework where Elise had loosened a brick. "What's inside?" "I haven't opened it all the way," Elise replied. "But I saw the corner of a fireproof box, military style. I didn't touch it." Lane signaled to the tech. "We open it, carefully." It took 20 painstaking minutes to remove the debris and lift the rusted hatch. A short ladder descended into a dark stone chamber. Air rushed up from below, stale, dry, and ancient, tinged with mildew and rust. Lane descended first, flashlight cutting a pale arc through the cellar. The space was no larger than a tool shed, 10 feet wide, square, walls made of rough stone and packed earth. Old cans sat rotting in crates. A rusted lantern dangled from a bent nail. In the far corner, half covered by a mold-eaten tarp, sat the box, black, heavy, untouched by flame. Lane ran her gloved fingers across the latches. No heat damage. This thing survived intact. She clicked them open. The hinges groaned. Inside lay a stack of items sealed against time, photographs, documents, and a spiral-bound notebook. On top sat a Polaroid, its edges curled with age. Elise leaned in. A barefoot girl with long brown hair smiled up from the photo, arms wrapped tight around a man with a sunburned face and thick mustache. "That's them," she whispered. "Lucia and Jim Halbrook." Lane didn't respond. Her eyes had locked on the notebook beneath the photo, handwritten across the cover, "For whoever finds this," dated July 15th, 1986. Meanwhile, in Austin, a woman clutched a tea mug with trembling hands. Her name hadn't been Margaret Halbrook in years. She'd become Janice again, quietly adopting her middle name after everything fell apart. It wasn't an escape. It was a survival instinct. She had never remarried, never sold the house Jim built, and never, not once, stopped hoping. So when the call came that morning from a sheriff's department she hadn't heard from in nearly 4 decades, she almost let it go to voicemail. But when she answered, the voice was measured and calm. "Mrs. Halbrook, this is Sheriff Rebecca Lane out of Burke County, North Carolina. We found something related to your family's case. We'd like you to come identify it in person." Her hands went numb. She barely managed to write down the directions. When she called her sister Doris, all she could manage was, "It's about Lucia." 3 hours later, Margaret sat in the back of a sheriff's vehicle, winding through mountain roads she'd once driven with a little girl asleep in the back seat. Her knuckles were white around the strap of her purse. Doris sat beside her, silent, until she finally asked, "Do you remember that weekend?" "All of it," Margaret said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes told the truth. "Jim packed the cooler. I braided Lucia's hair. She begged me for blueberry pancakes when they got back. They never did." At the clearing, Elise met them at the trailhead. "I'm so sorry for the circumstances," she said gently, "but I think someone needs to finally understand what was buried here." She led them to the cellar. When Margaret saw the Polaroid, her hand flew to her mouth. Her voice cracked. "That's the porch. Lucia had just lost a tooth. She made Jim take 10 pictures of that gap." Her fingers trembled as she took the notebook. No one else had read it. That honor belonged to her. She opened the cover. "If you're reading this, we didn't make it out. My name is Jim Halbrook. My daughter is Lucia. She's 9. We've been hiding for 2 days from a man who followed us up here. I think he meant to hurt us. I've locked us in this cellar. I've sealed it the best I can. I don't know if anyone will find us, but if you do, please tell my wife I tried." Margaret's knees buckled. Doris caught her. On July 13th, 1986, Jim Halbrook sat on the porch of the cabin, sweat trailing down his back, watching the trees. He thought he was safe. But someone, was already in those woods, watching him back. The late afternoon light spilled through the pines like molten amber, casting broken shards of gold across the ridge. Everything felt strangely suspended, the air warm and damp, yet eerily still. No birdsong, no breeze. Just the rhythmic creak of the porch swing where Lucia sat, legs dangling over the edge, toes dusted in mountain soil. Her fingers idly turned pages of a paperback she barely read, humming a soft tune under her breath. She wore her favorite pink tank top and striped shorts, the ones her mom had folded fresh just that week. Her rainbow-bright lunchbox rested beside her, sandwich untouched. Inside the cabin, Jim sipped from his canteen, sweat beading on his temples. His gaze swept the trail beyond the clearing again. Something about this day gnawed at him. Since sunrise, he'd noticed things, subtle but wrong. A crack of twigs where no animal moved, a flicker of motion just outside his vision. Something watching, something waiting. He tried to shrug it off. Deer, maybe. A squirrel. But the unease had rooted itself deeper with each passing hour. "You doing okay, Peanut?" he asked, his voice low but gentle. Lucia nodded without looking up. "It's hot. Want to dip your feet in the creek again?" She wrinkled her nose. "Too many bugs." He chuckled and stood, brushing off his jeans. "All right, I'll go grab some kindling. We'll get a fire going. Roast hot dogs, maybe even s'mores." Lucia perked up, a smile tugging at her lips. "Can I toast mine this time?" "You bet." He tousled her hair and stepped off the porch. The moment his boots crunched over dry leaves behind the cabin, the air shifted again. He spotted it immediately. A boot print. Large, deep, fresh, too big to be his, certainly not Lucia's. He crouched low, fingertips tracing its edge. Then his eyes caught something further up, a mark etched into bark. 3 vertical lines, deliberate, intentional. His stomach tightened. Turning back toward the cabin, he forced calm into his voice. "Lucia, come inside." She looked up, confused. "Why?" "Now, sweetheart, please." Something in his tone made her obey. She grabbed her lunchbox and slipped through the screen door. Jim followed and latched it shut behind them. Inside, the air was cool, the shadows long. One cot, a rusted wood stove, the smell of old timber and time. He pulled the curtains tight. His pulse thundered in his ears. "Daddy, what's wrong?" He knelt beside her, hands steady on her shoulders. "Nothing bad," he lied gently. "I just saw someone near the trail. I think they're lost, but just in case, we're staying in here for a little bit." Lucia frowned. "Are they scary?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe." That night, Jim didn't sleep. He sat in the wooden chair by the stove, rifle across his lap. Every creak, every rustle outside sharpened his nerves. Lucia, curled in her sleeping bag beside him, thumb in her mouth, one small hand gripping the hem of his shirt. After midnight, it began, the creaking, the sound of footfalls on pine needles, and then a knock, just one. Jim rose slowly, every muscle tight with fear. At the window he saw a figure, still, watching, just at the edge of the tree line. He raised the rifle. "Get out of here, I'm armed." No response. "Lucia," he said quietly. "Get your things, we're leaving." Behind the cabin, hidden beneath old pine needles, was a root cellar he'd found by chance when clearing brush the first day. Reinforced stone, no windows, concealed from every angle. He lowered Lucia down first, then followed, pulling the hatch shut behind them. Darkness swallowed them whole. The next journal entry, scribbled in shaky pen strokes, read, "We've been down here all night." I heard him walking above us. He tried the door, tried the windows, but he never spoke. He's still there. I know it. I left the food upstairs. Just water down here now. Lucia's pretending we're camping in a secret fort. She smiled, but it's fading. If someone finds this, he's still out there. I don't know who he is, but he followed us, and he's waiting. Then came the final note, scrawled on July 14th. He set fire to the cabin. I saw the smoke through the cracks. We heard the beams fall. I stuffed towels in the corners. We barely breathed. Lucia cried herself to sleep. She's still breathing. Whoever he is, he never checked, never called out. He just burned it. I think he wanted to cover something up. We can't go up yet, not until morning. But if we don't make it, please know I did everything I could for her. My name is Jim Halbrook. My daughter is Lucia. We didn't run. We didn't die in that fire. We hid, and we survived. By the time Sheriff Lane and Elise finished documenting the cellar, daylight had begun to bleed from the sky. The Polaroid, the notebook, sealed in evidence bags, were secured in the ranger's truck. Margaret and Doris had returned to the station, blank with shock. Elise stayed behind, her nerves coiled, instincts pulling her to the far corner of the cellar where the soil had shifted. Something glinted in the flashlight beam. "Elise?" Lane's voice echoed from above. "There's something else," Elise called back. She reached in, gloved fingers brushing aside loose soil. Her hand found fabric, something small, soft. A child's handbag, baby blue with white trim. Melted vinyl marked the strap. The clasp rusted, but when Elise opened it, the inside was clean, untouched. Tucked inside, a folded note. A Barbie sticker clung to the corner, faded, fragile. Lane unfolded it. The writing was childish, messy, but clear. "If you find this, my name is Lucia Halbrook. My daddy is with me. We are hiding from the man in the trees. I don't want to die. Please tell my mommy I was good. I didn't cry." Elise blinked rapidly. Lane's voice caught in her throat. She was saying goodbye. Inside the bag were more pieces of a life paused too soon. A plastic barrette, a pink crayon, and something heavier, a cassette tape, melted along one edge, labeled in a child's handwriting, "Lucia, July 12th. Lane held it up. "You think it still works?" "I know someone," Elise said. "Wildlife Audio Lab in Boone. If anyone can recover it, he can. Have it processed. Now chain of custody starts with you." As they climbed from the cellar, Elise paused. The dark yawned below. She could still hear the echo of roots shifting against stone, still feel the whisper of a child's plea left behind in the dirt. The next day, Elise drove into the heart of Boone, North Carolina. The Wildlife Audio Lab was more fortress than facility. No windows, just walls and hums of hidden machines. She handed the warped cassette to Dr. Brennan Kessler, a longtime colleague and audio reconstruction expert. "This looks like it went through hell," he said, eyeing the tape with tweezers. "It did," Elise replied quietly. "But there's a voice on it, a little girl's. From 1986. He looked up, understanding immediately. "I'll get it prepped. Should take about 90 minutes. Elise sat down in the sterile waiting room, her hands shaking slightly. Outside, the mountain wind howled softly, carrying echoes of a voice that had waited decades to be heard. 2 hours later, Elise sat in the dim hush of the sound booth, headphones pressed tight to her ears. On the other side of the glass, Brennan Kessler monitored the waveform on the screen. But his eyes never left her. She didn't blink, didn't move, just listened. From the hiss of degraded tape came a fragile whisper, a voice from another lifetime. "My name is Lucia Halbrook. I'm 9. Elise's breath caught. "I'm hiding with my dad, under the cabin. He says not to talk loud, but I'm scared." We heard the man again. He was outside. He had something metal in his hand. "Daddy says it's not safe to go up. He says we'll stay here one more night. He's going to block the air holes so the smoke doesn't get in." A long pause. Then, soft, barely audible, "Mommy, I hope you're not crying. I was brave." "I was brave," Daddy said. "I'm going to keep my lunchbox in case we get out." "Okay, I'm turning this off now. I love you, Mommy." Click. Tape ends. Elise removed the headphones, hands trembling, her eyes red-rimmed. "She was alive," she whispered, voice cracking. "She was alive when the fire started." Brennan nodded solemnly. "The quality's rough, but that was a girl saying goodbye." Later that evening, inside the ranger station, Margaret Halbrook sat at the long conference table, the small blue handbag resting beside her like a sacred relic. She'd cleaned every inch of it, removing soot with gentle cloths, fingers brushing the vinyl surface like she was touching her daughter's hand again. "She picked it herself," Margaret murmured. "With her allowance. She called it grown-up Barbie blue, not baby blue. She was proud of that." Beside her, Doris sipped tea with both hands, watching her sister hold on to memory like it might collapse if she let go. "She was alive," Margaret repeated. "For at least 2 days. She made it through the fire. They both did." Sheriff Lane entered the room with Elise and Brennan following. Margaret looked up as Lane placed a laptop on the table. "We recovered audio from the tape," Lane said gently. It's Lucia's voice. She recorded it the day before the fire. Would you like to hear it? Margaret nodded slowly, lips trembling but eyes steady. As Lucia's small voice played into the quiet room, Margaret covered her mouth, shoulders shaking, silent sobs catching in her throat. Doris reached over, her hand steady against her sister's. When the tape ended, the silence felt endless. Then Margaret sat up straighter, wiped her tears, and said with fierce clarity, "She didn't die that night." Lane hesitated, searching for the right words. She talked about her lunchbox, about saving it, about coming out. She wasn't preparing to die. She was planning to survive. Doris nodded. Jim was smart. If they survived the fire, he would have waited for night. He would have found a way out. Margaret turned to Lane, her voice barely above a whisper. If there's even a sliver of a chance that Lucia lived past that night, someone took her. That same night, July 14th, 1986. The woods stood still under a moonless sky. Not even the cicadas dared sing. A man crouched at the edge of the scorched clearing, a red gas can cooling in the damp grass behind him. His clothes reeked of gasoline. His hands were blackened with soot. He had watched the cabin burn, watched it collapse inward like a dying beast. He hadn't seen anyone run. He hadn't expected to. He moved forward now, boots cracking across the crust of cooled ash, movements confident, unhurried, like a man who'd done this before. Because he had. He had followed them for days. He remembered them clearly. The man in the dress shirt, the little girl with the soda, that quick stop at the Morgan gas station, the smile the girl gave the cashier. Too trusting. He knelt at the hearth, poking at the debris with a stick. Melted metal, a rusted pan, no bodies, no bones, just things. Something was off. Their gear was still laid out in the truck, food, blankets, water. The fire had done its job, but something about this felt unfinished. The man didn't run. He hid. The stranger walked back toward the tree line. 20 yards off, he stopped at a pine tree with broken branches near its base. He knelt. There, in the soft dirt, a child's boot print. He smiled. That same night, deep in the earth, Lucia lay trembling in the root cellar. Her body still ached from the heat, her lungs raw from the smoke. Jim had pressed wet towels into the vents, had held her as she coughed, whispered it would be okay. Now they lay wrapped in an emergency blanket, her head on his chest. "Daddy," she whispered. "Is it over?" "I think so," he murmured. Then, footsteps, slow, heavy, deliberate, above them. Jim's body stiffened. A scraping sound, wood on stone, a dragging motion. Jim moved a hand over Lucia's mouth gently and pulled her close. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just gripped his shirt like a lifeline. The footsteps circled once, twice. Then silence. For almost an hour. Then they were gone. At sunrise, the man returned. He stood at the trail's edge, overlooking what remained of the cabin, just ash and smoke curling lazily into the cold morning air. He reached into his pocket and pulled something out, a pink barrette, melted slightly from heat. He turned it once between his fingers, then tossed it into the ferns. Then he walked away. His truck was different now, older, no plates, just dust and gravel beneath his tires as he disappeared around the bend, leaving behind nothing but cinders and a story no one was meant to hear. March 12th, 2024. Burke County Sheriff's Office. Sheriff Lane stared at a photograph, grainy, black and white, scanned from a 1986 security tape. A man in sunglasses and a dress shirt, a red gas can in hand, standing at a pump outside a gas station. Elise leaned over her shoulder. "That's him. It has to be." Witnesses said he paid in cash, no ID, but the timestamp matches the day the Halbrooks went missing. Nearby, Margaret sat silently, the handbag in her lap. "That gas can," she said. "It was found at the cabin, burned. They said it melted near the tree line. Lane nodded. We never had a suspect. No prints, no tags, just a shadow. Doris leaned in. You think this man set the fire? I think he waited, Lane said. And I think he took something with him when he left. Margaret's eyes glistened. Then my daughter didn't die in that fire. And Lane, for once, had no argument. March 13th, 2024. Austin, Texas. The attic was still and musty, filled with old dust and older grief. Margaret climbed the ladder, her hands already searching through Jim's old desk, drawers untouched for decades. She found a shallow tin box, pried it open. Inside, rolls of 35mm film. One was labeled in Jim's handwriting, burnt hollow, July 1986. She clutched it to her chest. Doris, she whispered. He took pictures. 3 hours later, at the Austin Film and Memory Lab, a technician studied the film. You said this is from '86, he asked. Margaret nodded. Elise stood beside her, having flown in that morning with Lane's blessing. Some fading, slight warping from heat, but most of these can be recovered, the tech said. I'll print and digitize them. 1 hour later, the prints were laid out across the counter. Lucia, barefoot on the porch, sitting on a log, eating a sandwich, laughing. Jim was in a few, always in the background, always watching her, as if protecting her through the lens. Then Elise froze. There, she pointed. A photo of Lucia sitting on a boulder at the edge of the woods. In the background, between two trees, was the faint outline of a man. Just a sliver of shadow, but he was there. Jim didn't mention anyone else on the mountain, Margaret whispered. Because I don't think he saw him, Elise said. But Lucia did. In the image, Lucia's head was turned, her eyes slightly widened. Curious. Distracted. She saw him. That night, Elise sat in her hotel room, the enhanced photo glowing on her laptop. She compared it to the gas station still. Same height, same posture, same stillness. She texted Lane immediately. We have a match. The man from the gas station was on the mountain. Lucia saw him. He didn't come for the cabin. He came for them. March 14th, Burke County, North Carolina. Sheriff Lane stepped out of her cruiser at the sagging entrance of the Red Pines Motor Lodge, 10 miles south of Burnt Hollow. The sign still flickered vacancy. The ice machine was long dead. Inside, the air smelled of bleach and cigarette ghosts. Behind the counter, a man in his late 60s looked up from a battered Sudoku book. You're here about 1986, he said before Lane could speak. Heard from dispatch. You the owner? She asked, flashing her badge. Sort of. My dad ran it back then. Harold Tripp. He kept everything. Had a thing about records. Lane raised an eyebrow. Let's take a look. The truth, 38 years buried, was beginning to unravel. And the mountain wasn't done speaking yet. Lane followed the old motel manager into the back room. The walls were lined with dusty file cabinets, their drawers heavy with history. One drawer was already open, labeled 1986. The man gestured toward a thick guest ledger, its leather spine cracked with age, its pages curled from time and sunlight. I pulled July for you, he said. You're lucky. He was old school. Didn't go digital until the 90s. Lane sat down and opened the book. The names passed like ghosts beneath her fingers. Room 8, Room 3, Room 5. And then, on July 11th, scrawled in heavy pen, Room 6. James Kell. Paid cash. 2 nights. No phone, no plate. Lane narrowed her eyes. Do you remember this guest? The man shook his head. Nah, but that's not his real name. My dad used to laugh about that. Said anyone checking in as James Kell was hiding something. Lane blinked. You mean like Hannibal Lecter? From Silence of the Lambs? He grinned. Exactly. James Kell, that's Hannibal's alias. Dad always said it was a red flag when people used movie names. Lane pulled on her gloves. Mind if I take this page? Sure. Just leave the rest of the book. As she slid the page into an evidence sleeve, something caught her eye. In the corner where the man had signed, an oily smudge, faint but unmistakable. "You still got an old fingerprint kit?" The manager gave a crooked smile. "You think I don't?" 2 hours later, at the Burke County Forensics Lab, the partial print was scanned and uploaded. Lane stood over the technician's shoulder, silent. The system chirped. "I've got a match," the tech said, eyes wide. Lane's breath hitched. Name, Victor Dane Tilman. Date of birth, January 12, 1949. Aliases, James Kell, Vincent Dale, Curtis Rann. Status, deceased, presumed. Last sighting, 1986. Lane stared. "No," she whispered. "He's not dead." Elise compiled the background check. Tilman's record unfolded like a shadow. Born in Ohio. Multiple arrests between 1974 and 1985. Trespassing, assault, suspected abductions. Never convicted. Always slipped through. Known to use false identities. Often lived off-grid. Cheap motels, forest cabins, campgrounds. Once an electrician. Once a wilderness guide. Final sighting, August 1986. A gas station outside Kingsport, Tennessee. He vanished after that. No records, no trail, until now. March 15th, 2024, Halbrook residence. Margaret sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped tightly around a photo. Elise and Sheriff Lane sat across from her. Doris stood by the stove, silent. "So you're saying this man Tilman was stalking them?" Margaret asked, her voice brittle. Lane nodded. "He followed Jim and Lucia to that cabin. We believe he watched them for days. He checked into a motel less than 15 miles from the trailhead, under a fake name. And he had a red gas can." Margaret's hand trembled. "He's in this photo," she whispered. "The one from the film roll. Lucia saw him." Elise added, "We believe he returned after the fire, and he may have found the root cellar." Margaret froze. "Then, if he opened it, if they were alive, we don't know," Lane said gently. But Tilman vanished again. No arrests, no sightings, no bank use. "Or," Elise said quietly, "he took someone with him. Someone small, someone no one was looking for." Silence wrapped the table in grief. March 16th, Pisgah National Forest. Elise followed an old unpaved road deep into the woods. Her GPS led her to a forgotten land deed, property under Tilman's uncle's name since the 60s. The cabin revealed itself like a secret, log-framed, rot-eaten, windows boarded. The porch sagged like it had held too many secrets too long. The front door wasn't broken. It was just open. Inside, the air was dry, bitter, a place where silence had been bred. She moved slowly from room to room. Dust motes hung in light like suspended time. Animal nests, broken furniture, and then a door, padlocked, from the outside. The wood was worn smooth, like it had been opened and closed hundreds of times. Elise pried it with a crowbar. The lock gave. The door creaked open. She stepped into cold. The room was small, 8 feet wide, no windows, insulated walls. Oh, mattress on the floor, a dented chair, and pinned to the wall, with a single rusty nail, a child's drawing. Crayon figures. She shined her flashlight. There were more. Trees, stars, a girl holding hands with a tall man. On the mattress sat a plastic lunchbox, rainbow bright. Elise's breath caught. She opened it. Inside, a half-finished friendship bracelet, broken crayons, a photo of a smiling girl, sun-faded and folded in half. Written on the back in block letters, Lucia. Later at the sheriff's office, Lane stared at the lunchbox. "It matches what Margaret described," she said. "And the food wrappers in the trash, they're dated 1988, Elise added. "She was here, at least 2 years after the fire." Lane whispered. "Jim may have died, but Lucia didn't. She was taken, and she was alive." Elise stared at one drawing. 2 stick figures, one small, one tall. The taller one had no face. She drew him faceless, Lane said, like she never wanted to remember. March 17th. Halbrook residence. Margaret wept as she held the drawing in gloved hands. Doris sat beside her, watching helplessly. I told her to be brave, Margaret whispered. And she was. For years, Elise knelt beside her. She survived something unimaginable. We don't know how long she was kept there, or if she was moved again. But what we do know is, your daughter didn't die in that fire. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Then where is she now? Lane said nothing. Elise met Margaret's gaze. We're going to find out. March 18th. Briar Glen Adult Care Facility, Rutherford County. The nurse walked them down a narrow hallway. She came in the fall of '94, the nurse said softly. No name, no ID. Dropped off at Mercy General, dehydrated, underweight, nonverbal. They transferred her here under the name Jane Glenn. After the county, Elise held a folder tight to her chest. Inside, a photo of 9-year-old Lucia Halbrook, a scan of the crayon drawing, a close-up of the rainbow bright lunchbox, a forensic age progression of what Lucia might look like now. They stopped outside room 12A. She doesn't speak, the nurse said. But she understands. Trauma, we think. But she's calm. She never lashes out. She just exists. The door opened. The woman inside sat by the window. Her cardigan hung loosely off her shoulders. Her brown hair, streaked with gray, fell to her shoulders. Her arms were folded tight across her stomach like she was bracing for a storm. She didn't look up. Elise stepped forward, setting the folder gently on the table. I brought some pictures, she said softly. No response. She opened to the first one. Lucia, age 9, smiling, lunchbox in hand. The woman's body tensed. Elise kept her voice calm. Your name might be Lucia Halbrook. You disappeared in 1986. You were with your dad in the mountains. Someone took you. Still no sound, but the woman's fingers twitched. Elise laid down the second photo, the child's crayon drawing, the girl holding hands with a faceless man. The woman reached out slowly and touched the stick figure. Her breath caught in her throat. Her fingers trembled. Then she began to cry, soundlessly, openly, like a child waking from a long, dark dream. Elise didn't move. She didn't speak. She simply let the silence hold her, because after nearly 4 decades lost to time, fear, and fire, Lucia Halbrook had finally been found. You drew that, didn't you? Lucia's eyes welled. She didn't speak, but the drawing, crumpled now from the pressure of her hand, remained pressed against her chest like a lifeline. Lane reached for the final photo in the folder, a forensic age progression of what Lucia Halbrook might look like today. She slid it gently across the table. The woman stared at it. Her hand rose slowly, almost reverently, and hovered beside her face, tracing the shape of her own cheek. Then, she nodded. Just once. 2 hours later, they sat together again, just Elise and Lucia this time, in a quiet interview room, away from officers, away from observers. Lucia clutched a stuffed rabbit, threadbare, worn to near rags. It had arrived with her in 1994. It had survived nearly as long as she had. Elise reached into her bag and placed the cassette player gently on the table. I want to play you something. She pressed play. Lucia's voice, 9 years old and whispering from across time, filled the room. My name is Lucia Halbrook. I'm 9. We're hiding from the man in the trees. There was no scream, no gasp, only a broken, silent sob that ripped through Lucia like a wave. Her shoulders shook violently, but she made no sound, only tears falling like winter rain. Elise rose quietly and took her hand. You're safe now, she whispered. You made it. Lucia clutched the drawing to her chest again, nodding. One tear slid down her cheek and disappeared into the soft fabric of the rabbit's ear. Later that night, the call came in. DNA results confirmed what everyone already knew in their hearts. Jane Glenn, the silent woman in room 12A, was Lucia Margaret Halbrook, missing since 1986. She had been alive all this time. Elise stared at the confirmation report. "What about Tilman?" she asked. Lane shook her head slowly. "If he's alive, he's a ghost. But someone dropped Lucia off in '94. Someone drove her to that hospital. And it wasn't him, not unless he changed everything." Elise nodded. "Then that's where we look next." March 20th, Ironvale, Tennessee. The call came just after sunrise. A surveyor had found an abandoned 1978 Oldsmobile Vista cruiser behind a collapsed barn on foreclosed farmland. The VIN matched the car registered once to Victor Tilman before he vanished. By noon, Lane and Elise were on site. The vehicle was a skeleton of rust, partially buried in soft earth. The windshield was cracked. Moss crept over the hood. No plates, no evidence of legal disposal, just left to rot. Inside the car, a glove box full of motel matchbooks and receipts, a back seat lined with an old wool blanket, child-sized, blue with white stars, and beneath it, a blood-stained flannel shirt. Next to it, an old Nikon camera. Elise handled it carefully. "Let's get that film processed. Boone Crime Lab." 6 hours later. The photographs developed in sequence. Most were mundane, streams, trailheads, valleys, the kind of images a survivalist might hoard. One showed the Vista cruiser parked on a ridge, another a small girl on a porch. Then came the one that stopped Elise cold, Jim Halbrook, alive. His eyes were swollen, bruised, his hands bound with wire. He sat in a wooden chair, slumped, his shirt torn. The same shirt found in the car. A faded timestamp marked the photo, August 4th, 1986. Over 2 weeks after the cabin fire. Later that evening in Austin, Elise sat at Margaret's kitchen table. She opened the folder, revealing the photo. "We believe Jim survived the fire. He was taken too, but we haven't found any trace of him after this." Margaret stared at the image. Her hand trembled as she touched the page. "That's his look," she whispered. "He'd clench his jaw like that when he was scared, but didn't want me to know." Doris reached over and held her sister's hand. "They tortured him," Margaret said. Elise didn't answer. She didn't need to. March 22nd, deep in the Great Smoky Mountains. The red circle on Tilman's hand-drawn map led them far off trail, deeper than any ranger markers reached. Thorns shredded their sleeves. The air turned damp and lifeless. No birdsong, no wind. Only their breath and the crunch of boots on mossy ground. Then they saw it. A shack, crumbling, the roof half-caved, a stone chimney twisted like a broken spine. Inside, chains, buckets, a cot frame. In the corner, Elise spotted newer wood in the floor. She pried it loose. Beneath, a stone-lined pit, 4 feet deep. Inside, bones, a partial skeleton, male, skull fractured. Near the remains, a rusted wristwatch. The inscription still legible, J.M.H., love always. M and L. Elise closed her eyes. Jim Halbrook. Lane nodded, voice low. He never made it out. Tilman buried him here. Back at Burke County, the forensics report confirmed it. Jim had survived the fire, only to die weeks later. Cause, blunt force trauma, likely from the fire poker found nearby. "Why keep him alive for weeks?" Elise asked. Lane looked toward the window. He didn't want money. He didn't want leverage. He wanted pain. Some of these men, suffering is the point. March 25th, Briar Glen Care Facility. Lucia sat with Elise beside a new photo album, one lovingly compiled by Margaret and Doris. Each page was a piece of a life stolen too soon, Birthdays, lake trips, school photos. Lucia's fingers paused at one image. Jim, smiling, lifting toddler Lucia onto his shoulders. She wept, silently. Then, from her cardigan pocket, she pulled a silver chain. At the end, Jim's wedding ring, flattened, worn, but still whole. She pressed it into Elise's hand. "You never forgot him," Elise said. Lucia didn't speak. She didn't have to. March 30th, Burnt Hollow Ridge. Margaret returned to the mountain where it had all begun. The cabin was gone. Just ashes and the stone hearth swallowed in ivy. She walked alone through the clearing, boots silent on soft earth. The path Jim once cleared was gone, swallowed by time. She stopped at the spot where the porch once stood, where Lucia had sat, where Jim had made his final stand. From her pocket, she pulled the crayon drawing. It was faded, creased, still sacred. "I know you tried to protect her," she whispered into the wind. And the mountain, old and still, whispered back. Burke County Archive Room. Elise sat cross-legged on the floor, going through boxes pulled from Tilman's car. Maps, receipts, film rolls. Then, an envelope hidden in the seat lining, "Keep for safe" written in block letters. Inside, 4 Polaroids. One showed Lucia, 10 years old, in a flannel gown, by lantern light. Another showed a barn. A third, a man's hands tied with rope. But the fourth, burnt hollow, before the fire, taken from the woods. In the second-story window of the cabin, a man stood. Not Jim, not Lucia, someone else. Later that night, Elise and Lane reviewed it. "That's not Tilman," Lane said. "He's too young. Look at his build. His posture." Elise nodded. "And the date, July 10th. That's before the fire." They enhanced the image. The man was clean-cut, no hat, no beard. Long arms, standing like he belonged there. Lane opened an old report they'd nearly forgotten. July 8th, 1986. A gas station clerk had described a younger man with Tilman. Early 20s, hitchhiker, claimed to be his nephew. The report had been dismissed. Until now. March 31st. Austin. Margaret sat at the table, the new photo before her. The man in the window. "This isn't the man she remembers," she said. "But she remembers. 2 voices." "She said it once," Doris added. "In her sleep. I thought it was just a dream." Elise's voice was steady. "She wasn't taken by one man." Margaret looked up. "Then what happens now?" Lane closed the file slowly. "We reopen everything. There's still someone out there, maybe older, maybe hidden. But he knows what happened. He knows where Lucia was kept." Margaret nodded. "She survived once. We'll help her survive again." April 12th. Location unknown. In a dark room lit only by a small television playing Highway Patrol, a man sat at a workbench. The walls were covered in newspaper clippings. Woman found alive. 38 years after cabin disappearance, Halbrook remains identified. Statewide search for second suspect continues. He clipped one new headline, pinned it beside the others. His eyes lingered. Then he smiled, just slightly, and returned to his work.